Chapter 1, The Ceremony. The war ended on a Tuesday. Captain Elias Croft found out the same way everyone else did, through a buzz on his wristcom and a roar that swept across the Helios station like a tide. Fireworks. Tears. Men twice his age weeping into their sleeves. 22 months of blood and static and impossible geometry, and suddenly it was over. He didn't feel much. That was the thing nobody warned you about, how peace could arrive wearing the same hollow face as grief. 3 weeks later, Elias stood at a podium in Geneva with 16 cameras on his face and a medal the size of a dinner plate on his chest. Sector Commander Prentice was speaking. Elias caught every fourth word. Unprecedented bravery, the architect of the Rho 7 counteroffensive. Earth owes this man. He was 34 years old, and he felt ancient. The treaty with the Vicary Empire had been signed 48 hours earlier, a document 17 pages long and dense with provisions that no one outside the diplomatic corps fully understood. What the public understood was simpler: Earth had won. The Vicary had conceded. And to seal the accord, there would be an exchange of gifts between the two civilizations. Earth sent a satellite array and a library of classical music. The Vicary sent a woman. Her name, as announced through the joint translator system, was Sela. The ceremony introducing her to the world lasted 40 minutes and was broadcast to 11 billion people. She stood on the stage in a gown the color of deep ocean water, dark, shimmering, alive somehow, and she did not speak. She simply stood, hands folded, eyes forward, the picture of graceful surrender. Commander Prentice announced that, as per Vicary custom, a bonding gift of this nature required a specific recipient. Someone of sufficient rank and military distinction. The room turned toward Elias before Prentice even said his name. He forced a smile. The cameras loved it. Afterward, one of the diplomatic aides pulled him aside and explained the arrangement in clinical terms. His new quarters had been prepared in the Aurora complex in Geneva. She would be there when he arrived. The Empire had been very specific: she was to remain in his household, at his side, for the duration of the post-treaty period. Think of it as symbolic, the aide said, patting Elias's arm. She's more of an ambassador than a wife. Just, treat her well. Eyes of the world, and all that. Elias looked across the room at Sela. She was being photographed with a group of senators, motionless and precise, her expression as still as sculpture. He had survived 4 campaigns, 2 orbital strikes, and a chemical ambush in the tunnels of Mira Station. He was not prepared for this. The Aurora complex was a tower of glass and polished stone overlooking Lake Geneva. His new quarters occupied the 31st floor, 3 rooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a silence so complete it pressed against his ears. Sela was already there when he arrived. She stood at the window with her back to him, watching the lake. She was still wearing the ocean-colored gown. In the natural light, her skin had a faint luminescence to it, like moonstone, and her hair, black, straight, falling past her shoulders, seemed to shift color slightly as she turned. She lowered her eyes when she saw him. A small, precise bow. "Captain," she said. Her voice, through the translator chip embedded near his ear, came out low and neutral. "Elias," he corrected, dropping his bag near the door. "Just Elias." He looked around the room. 2 separate sleeping areas, he noted with relief. Did they give you everything you need? Food? I don't know what you eat. I should have asked someone. I have what I require. Okay. He rubbed the back of his neck. I want you to know I didn't ask for this. The arrangement. I don't expect anything from you. You can have your privacy. I'll stay out of your way. She watched him with those extraordinary eyes, pale silver, with a faint ring of gold at the edges, like an eclipse. You are kind, she said. And then she turned back to the window. He stood there a moment longer, feeling useless, and then went to find the kitchen. Chapter 2, The Unmasking. It was the 3rd night when it happened. Elias had been sleeping badly since the war ended, not nightmares exactly, more like a pressure behind his eyes that kept him hovering at the surface of sleep. He was in the kitchen at 2 a.m., drinking terrible instant coffee, when he heard her. She was in the main room. Not pacing, something more deliberate than that. He heard the low, continuous murmur of her voice, speaking in a language he didn't recognize. Not Vicary Standard, which the translators processed. Something older. Rhythmic. He pushed open the door. She stopped the moment she saw him. And then, and this was the thing that stopped his blood, her expression changed. The submissive cast of her features, the soft downward angle of her gaze, the careful arrangement of her posture, it dissolved. Like a mask lifted. What replaced it was something entirely different, alert, sharp, ancient. Her silver eyes were luminous in the dark, faintly pulsing. She looked at him the way a scientist looks at a problem they've been waiting to solve. "You should sit down," she said. And this time she wasn't using the translator. Perfect English, unaccented, clear as water. He sat. She remained standing. The gown had been replaced with simple dark clothing, and without the ceremony around her she looked less like a gift and more like, he searched for the word, a commanding officer. How long? He asked. The English. I have known your language for 11 of your years, she said. I was assigned to this mission before the war began. The word mission landed like a stone. Then the war was not what your people were told it was. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap, but the gesture now carried no submission. It was composed, deliberate. We did not lose, Elias. The Valkyrie do not fight the way you fight. We do not take territory with weapons. We take it from within. He felt the coffee cup heavy in his hand. The treaty was designed by my people, she continued. The exchange of a bonding gift, that clause was ours. It was the point of the entire negotiation. Your commanders believed they were receiving a gesture of defeat. They received the final stage of an invasion plan. You're here to spy. I am here to bond. She said it clinically, the way a doctor names a procedure. My species forms a biological link with high-ranking hosts. Over a period of weeks, through proximity and physical contact, the bond establishes itself. Once complete, I can access your memories. Military architecture. Command frequencies. The locations of your deep space installations. Everything you have ever known. He stared at her. Why are you telling me this? She was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that he started to think she wasn't going to answer. Because the bond has already begun, she said finally. And I felt something I was not prepared for. She told him that the bond was not like reading a file. It was not clean or organized. It came in fragments, flashes of sensation, emotion, image. Not targeted. Not filtered. I was prepared for strategy, she said. For the architecture of a soldier's mind. Codes and coordinates and defensive maps. Her silver eyes were steady on his. I was not prepared for the rest. The rest, he repeated. The boy you could not save on Mira Station. His name was Tomas. He was 19. You carried him 400 meters under fire and he still died in your arms, and you have replayed that walk every night since. She paused. The family on the Kellen moon. The residential sector you ordered struck because the intelligence said it was a weapons cache. The silence after. The way you have not spoken about it to anyone. Elias was very still. You were given a war to win, she said, and you won it. And every victory cost you something you cannot name. I have felt it. I have felt you mourn them, Elias. Every one of them. And I did not expect to find that in a soldier. What did you expect to find? A general. A weapon. A strategic mind. A pause that held something complicated in it. Not a man who grieves. Outside, the lake was silver and still. What happens now? He asked. That, she said quietly, is what I am trying to determine. Chapter 3, What the Bond Does. He did not sleep that night. He wasn't sure she did either. By morning they had reached an uneasy arrangement. She would tell him everything she knew about the plan. In exchange, he would not alert the military, not yet. He needed to understand the scope of it first. And she, apparently, needed time. Time for what? He asked. To decide who I am choosing to be, she said. He found he had no argument against that. The days that followed were the strangest of his life, and he had spent time in a zero-gravity surgical bay with shrapnel in his lung, so the bar was high. They talked. Long, careful conversations about things that had no diplomatic protocol, the mechanics of the bond, the structure of Valkyrie society, why the war had been manufactured and by whom within the Empire's political hierarchy. She was brilliant. That was the first thing that cut through his wariness. Not brilliant in the decorative way the media had packaged her, but structurally, architecturally brilliant. She thought in systems. She could take a military engagement he described and dismantle its logic in seconds, identify its fracture points, explain what should have been done differently. She had been studying humanity for 11 years and she understood them, in some ways, better than most humans understood themselves. You were wasted on this mission, he said one evening, without thinking. She looked at him across the dining table, and something shifted in her face, not offense, something more like surprise. What do you mean? I mean you're the most strategically gifted person I've ever spoken to. And they sent you here to, what? Steal database coordinates. The mission is more significant than you. I know what the mission is. I'm saying you're more than the mission. She was quiet for a long time. Then, that is not how my people think. I know, he said. I think that's what makes it sad. The bond, she explained, deepened with proximity. With time in the same space. With touch, though she said it carefully, clinically, watching his face for a reaction he tried not to give. Physical contact accelerates the neural link, she said. It is not designed to be intimate. It is biological. Transactional. But, he said. A pause. But it can become difficult to separate the function from the experience of it. He understood, suddenly, what she was telling him. He understood it even more clearly a week later, when she stumbled on the stairs. She'd been standing too quickly, some vicary response to sudden light, and he caught her by reflex. One hand at her waist, one at her arm. She was lighter than he expected and warmer, and when she looked up at him the silver in her eyes had deepened to something closer to slate, pulsing very faintly. Neither of them moved for a moment that stretched too long to be accidental. The bond, she said softly. A warning and an acknowledgement at once. I know, he said. He let her go. Slowly. That night she sat beside him on the long couch rather than across the room in the chair. She didn't explain it and he didn't ask. Her shoulder was warm against his arm. The pulsing at the edge of her eyes was steady, like breathing. He told her about Tomas. The whole story, not the report version. She listened without speaking, and when he finished she said, he would not have wanted you to carry him this long. You don't know that. I know what I felt in the bond, she said. I know how he felt about you, in those last 400 meters. It was not blame. He didn't ask how she could know that. He found, to his own surprise, that he believed her. She reached over and rested her hand on top of his. Just that. Still. Warm. He turned his hand over and held hers. The silver in her eyes went very bright for just a moment, like a flame catching. Neither of them moved until morning. Chapter 4, The Recall Signal. The recall signal came on a Thursday. Elias was in a meeting with the Joint Diplomatic Committee, routine, tedious, the kind of post-war bureaucracy that made combat feel simple, when his wristcom vibrated. He looked down. A message from Sela. 2 words, come home. He was out of the room in 30 seconds. She was standing at the window when he arrived, and he knew something was wrong from the way she was standing, not the stillness she'd had on that first night, the performed stillness of a gift on display. This was something else. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Her shoulders carried a tension he hadn't seen before. They're sending contact, she said without turning. My handlers. There's a scheduled check-in tonight. They'll use a frequency embedded in my neural architecture. I cannot block it. They will assess the bond's progress and determine if the information extraction phase should begin. He kept his voice even. And what will you tell them? That is the question. Now she turned. The silver in her eyes had that deep, stormy quality again, not the warmth he'd seen over the past weeks, but something underneath that, something older and very serious. I have enough. I want you to understand that. I have enough access to serve the mission. Codes. Frequencies. Structural locations. If I complete the extraction tonight, the Empire will have everything they need to compromise Earth's entire deep space network within 6 months. The words sat between them, heavy and exact. And if you don't complete it, he asked. Then I am in violation of my directive. My people do not have a tradition of mercy toward those who fail their assignments. Sela. There is more. Her voice had gone very quiet. The bond, at this stage, it is not something that can simply be discontinued. If I complete the mission and leave, the connection remains in you. Incomplete. Severed. It causes, your neurological structure would experience it as a permanent loss. Prolonged. Painful. He was quiet for a moment. You're telling me this so I won't try to stop you. I am telling you this because you deserve to know the cost of every possible choice, she said. That is what you do. You account for the costs. I learned that from you. He crossed the room. Not quickly, deliberately. And he stood in front of her, close enough that he could see the fine luminescence along her jaw, the faint pulse in her eyes. What do you want? He asked. Not what your mission requires. Not what your handlers expect. What do you want, Sela? Her breath, she breathed, he'd noticed that, slow and measured, not quite like a human but something analog to it, caught slightly. I want, she stopped. Started again. I have been designed and trained to want the completion of the mission. Every instinct I possess has been shaped toward that outcome. I know. What do you want underneath that? The silver in her eyes went very still. And then, quietly, she said, I want to stay. The check-in came at midnight. Elias sat in the kitchen with the lights off and waited. He didn't ask to be in the room, it wasn't possible, she'd explained. The frequency worked on a neural level. But she'd left the door between them open. He heard nothing, of course. Whatever the exchange was, it was entirely internal. After 22 minutes, she appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was pale, her natural luminescence muted, like a lamp with a hand over the glass. It's done, she said. He rose from the table. I told them the bond was incomplete. That it had stalled. That I required more time. She leaned against the doorframe as though she needed the support. They believed it. For now. They will not send another signal for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks for us to figure out what comes next. Her eyes found his. I have bought us time, Elias. Not safety. Time. He went to her. He took her face gently in both hands, and she let him, a thing she had never simply let anyone do, he understood, a thing that required in her what it would require in him, trust that arrived not from design but from choice. He kissed her. Softly, carefully, as if she were something that could still be frightened away. She kissed him back like she had been waiting 3 weeks and 11 years and the length of an entire war. When they broke apart, the silver in her eyes was brilliant, steady and full and warm. We have time, he said. We'll use it. Chapter 5, What Cannot Be Taken Back. 3 weeks is not a long time to dismantle an empire's strategy. They worked at the kitchen table, mostly at night, with low lights and cold coffee. Sela was methodical. She laid out the architecture of the Vicary infiltration plan the way she would lay out a military campaign, which Elias was beginning to understand, because to her it was one. He took notes. He asked questions. He had spent 2 decades learning to identify the structural weakness in an enemy's position, and he found that she welcomed the collaboration with something that looked, increasingly, like hunger. You enjoy this, he said, watching her trace a data map with her finger on the glass surface of the table. I enjoy, she paused. I enjoy being taken seriously as a strategist. Rather than as an instrument. Your people didn't take you seriously. I was very good at my function. That is different. He understood that difference from the inside out. They built a counterproposal, not a weapon, not a revelation, but a diplomatic offer. Sela would willingly disclose the structure of the infiltration plan to the Joint Committee, in exchange for a negotiated status, a protected position, outside the jurisdiction of both governments, in exchange for a decade of advisory work. A formal defection with terms. It was, as Elias noted, more elegant than anything the treaty itself had produced. They'll say you can't be trusted, he told her. They will say that about you as well, she replied. A decorated soldier who sheltered an enemy agent. I know. You could still report me. It would be cleaner. For your career. He looked at her across the table. In the low light she was extraordinary, not the alien perfection of the woman on the stage in Geneva, but something better, sharp and tired and specific, with a crease in her forehead she got when she was working through a problem and the habit of tapping her left thumb when she disagreed with something but was choosing to think before she said it. He had memorized her, he realized, the way you memorize a place you've decided is home. Sela. I'm not going to report you. She held his gaze for a long moment. Even now. After everything I told you I was sent here to do. Especially now, he said. Because you didn't do it. They went to Commander Prentice together, on a gray Monday morning with a folder of documentation and a request for a closed session. Prentice looked at the folder. He looked at Elias. He looked at Sela. This is going to be very complicated, he said. Yes, Elias agreed. The press will call it a scandal. The press will call it whatever gets the most clicks, Sela said. What matters is what it actually is. Prentice raised an eyebrow. And what is that? An opportunity, she said. If you are willing to be smarter than the people who designed this situation. Prentice was quiet for a moment. Then, I always thought there was something off about that treaty clause. There was, Elias said. Turns out we weren't the only ones playing the long game. The negotiations took 4 months. There were mornings when Elias was certain it would fall apart, too many governments, too many competing interests, too many people who needed a villain and couldn't decide if it was Sela or him or the entire Vicary Empire. There were evenings when none of it mattered because she was sitting beside him on the long couch, her head tilted toward his shoulder, her silver eyes half closed, reading from a paper book she'd developed an obsession with, a worn copy of Middlemarch that she'd found in his things and claimed without asking, which he found he didn't mind at all. One night she set the book down and said, I have been thinking about what you said. That I was wasted on this mission. And? I think you were wrong. She turned her head to look at him. I think the mission found the right person. The wrong objective. But the right person. He understood what she meant. If it had been someone else, someone more mechanical, more perfectly shaped by their training, less capable of the thing the Vicary hadn't accounted for, genuine curiosity about a human being, the extraction would have been complete in the first 2 weeks. Earth's deep space network would be compromised and the war would be quietly beginning again, dressed in the language of peace. Instead she had felt his grief. She had felt him mourn strangers. And something in her, something her handlers had not designed and could not have anticipated, had found that intolerable to exploit. The bond had worked exactly as intended. It just hadn't produced the intended result. The real invasion, she said quietly, was supposed to be emotional. Yours, I mean. I was supposed to access you. And instead? Her silver eyes were warm, and steady, and entirely her own. Instead, she said, it went both ways. He pulled her closer. She came without hesitation, that in itself still surprised him, the ease of it, the way she'd traded one kind of stillness for another. Not the performed calm of a diplomatic gift. The quiet of someone who had found, in the most unlikely possible place, a reason to stop pretending. Outside, Geneva was lit and ordinary and unknowing. Inside, the former instrument of an alien empire was reading Middlemarch, and the war hero who'd survived everything had discovered, as such men sometimes do, in the most inconvenient and irreversible way, that survival and living were not the same thing at all.